Why do military veterans do well in business and excel in their careers? Find out more in this episode of VetBizTV.
It's looking at the mission, the plan, your resources, what do you have available to you, and it's a 5-paragraph operations order. And if you're involved with that, and NCOs, officers, you don't have to just be a commissioned officer to be involved with that. And then, that was a big life lesson, was going through that process. And I used that skill set when I launched my own business.
Today's guest is Dan Buttery, the president and CEO of the War Memorial in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Dan is a Wisconsin native and retired from the U.S. Army as a captain and engineering officer. He's been deployed all over the world and was awarded the Bronze Star Medal for missions conducted in Iraq. Dan has a business background and is heavily involved in the veteran community. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Brian. Good to be here.
If we were friends in high school, who was Dan Buttery and why did you decide to join the military?
Yeah, well, I was always active in sports, and looking back, I have a lot of family. Our lineage goes back to the Revolutionary War, the Butterys, and I'm not saying that's why I would have served, but I'm sure there's some of that has to deal with DNA and the selfless service. I don't know, but I always was active, sports. I was a 3-sport person, and I really wanted to go in right away. I mean, I wanted to go in when I was in middle school. I was just very patriotic, have always been. I love my family and all those who served, and they're my heroes, really. And I carried that with me when I was in the military, and I would even call them, one retires as a sergeant major, the Marine retires as an E8, he declined E9 because he was at his 20 and he was like, I'm good.
Wow.
2 tours of Vietnam each, so
Yeah.
I get that, I guess, to a certain point, but I would call and just ask for their input and what do you think, and so I'm sure that set the stage. Team, right? Always working with teams, and a football field, track, basketball. It's just one of those things where it's just the way that you go physically active, and then how do you convert that into meaning something.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Of course, as you know, as a Marine, it's a service that's beyond the individual.
Yep, absolutely. You look like you could have played middle linebacker.
Well, yeah, they had me as fullback. They put me on the line for a while, which small school, but I was a linebacker. I played every down.
Yeah.
Small school again, so
Got to be flexible, just like the military.
yes, Semper Gumby.
So what are 2 to 3 takeaways you took away from the military that you still apply today, and how do you think that's helped fuel your success?
Well, I didn't go in right away. I went to college. My mom was dying of cancer, and at the time, and she, again, I'd mentioned her brothers who had served, and she had asked if I could please not go in, doing mom's work. So I was like, yes, ma'am, and I went to college, and she does pass away, and I enlist right after that. So I did it after college, so I was a little bit older. I was the professor at basic training, as they called me. And you go through it, the challenges, in fact, I remember there was a goofball in our basic training cycle.
There's always one.
There's always one, and of course, what do the drill sergeants do? They focus on it, because no, we're gonna change you.
Yeah.
And this guy was, we were up on a 3rd level training facility, and I saw it in his eyes, and he was like, I'm gonna jump. I'm gonna kill myself, is what he said. And I looked at him, I'm like, you understand you're bringing this onto yourself, right? And he looked at me, and I said, this pain will all go away. Just, I get it. You don't have to be this way the rest of your life, but just understand you don't have to be that. And he listened to me, and all of a sudden his attitude changed, and he didn't stand out to the drill sergeant. So part of that is just life lessons where you're growing older, you're learning the dynamics of folks. Big lesson, because I already have my degree, I commissioned through OCS, Officer Candidate School. I become I was soldier of the cycle for basic training for the brigade at 25. And there were a lot of other younger men and women who could run a lot faster than me, but it's about attitude and applying yourself. And then I OCS, and I become president of the OCS class. And one of the big takeaways that I got from that is you're learning the operational side of the military and the 5-paragraph operations order. And that translates directly into business life. And I applied that when I started my own business after I got out. I was in the reserves for most of my career. It's looking at the mission, the plan, your resources, what do you have available to you, and it's a 5-paragraph operations order. And if you're involved with that, and NCOs, officers, you don't have to just be a commissioned officer to be involved with that. Mm-hmm. And then, that was a big life lesson, was going through that process. And I used that skill set when I launched my own business.
Speaking of that, so, you've been involved with and you've helped start other nonprofits and things like that. Then you started a successful marketing business, and then you came to the War Memorial. What led you back into the nonprofit space?
Well, I was injured in Iraq, and so after 12 years of service, and I wanted to continue, but it was done, MMRB'd. And so you lose that mission. You get a little rudderless, and so I had my business going at the time as that was all happening in that transition. A lot of us who have served, we don't want to be stuck in a cubicle. Yeah. We don't want to be, and I'm not beating up on the corporations, but we don't always want to be in that big corporation because we've also learned to be pretty independent. I know that sounds ironic in having gone through the military because they pound that, that individualism out of you, but you actually have that. You have that, I can fit within a larger system, but also I've learned to be a leader. And I think so many of us who have served, we're teaching privates to be leaders, unlike the Soviet system where it's top down. Mm-hmm. And I think if you go through any level of rank and structure, you might be a private first class, but you've got 2 privates under you, and you're leading those. And that's an important piece to take from that. So a lot of businesses, independent businesses, small businesses, that's 80% of our economy. Yep. A lot of veterans will go that route. After World War II, that was the biggest thing. So many of them came back. You hear about the GI Bill, but what you don't hear about is about 80% or 75% of our returning World War II vets took that GI Bill, got that degree, and then started their own business. Or were part of a business that was smaller and then grew into a larger corporation. Enterprise. Yep. Gentleman who was on the USS Enterprise. That's why it's called Enterprise. Yep. So it's
That's a big company now.
It's a big company today.
Yeah.
So right.
So running a nonprofit's not an easy thing. You're always looking for volunteers and money, right? To keep the ship going. What's a typical day look like for you?
Well, it's mission, and you also asked a question earlier on why both the for-profit and nonprofit, and again, it's that sense of service, giving back. And so when I stood up Fisher House, Wisconsin, at the request, we did it as all volunteer. And for me, it brought that mission back. And so it was serving veterans, even though I couldn't, and the guys who were still deploying, my unit deployed multiple times after Iraq. And so you see them go and you're like, I've got your back, but what does that mean? And there are ways that you can do things without destroying yourself mentally and just as you see them struggling, and some of them were killed later on in later deployments. So that leads to mission. So every day for me, if I'm not on mission, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be someplace. And so I've got to be serving my fellow veterans in our community. So that's an important part. It's processing. I serve as president and CEO, so there's everything from the physical aspect of this building, but also becoming strategic and saying, again, we're 65 years young. Yeah. What's the next chapter? And what do we do to look towards what are our capabilities, but also not just don't do anything, do things that meet our mission, honor the dead, serve the living. And we will always be honoring our fallen. We are a memorial. But what does serve the living look like, and what are our capabilities? We just completed a 5-year strategic plan. The first time they've ever done that here as an organization. It took us about a year in working with our board of trustees and our senior staff. And we have a map. We now have a roadmap that we feel will fit within our looking down the range. Every business needs that. If you don't have a strategic vision, a strategic plan, growth models of what you're looking at, new initiatives, how can we resource it? And we have some things that we'll pilot, some things that will enhance that are existing, and some things are reach. That whole concept of, we'd like to get to that, we think that could work. And if it's a reach, we'll pilot it first and then move into it. So we have a number of reach initiatives that we've started already in the last 2 years. The beer garden is an example in partnership with Kegel's Inn, because we didn't know, would it work? It's working incredibly well, and we're getting a lot of great foot traffic with that. Yourself, I think, have been a patron of our beer garden, but that was an example of something new and trying, and does the market respond well? So for me on a daily basis, other than a few fires that you might have to try to put out, which they happen here quite a bit, like anybody else, it's looking at some of the existing model and say, how can we improve it? How can we become more efficient with what we're doing? I can't just throw money at anything, because again, we're a private nonprofit, but we also have a limited spend, and then working with the community. Yep. Some of this stuff takes months, sometimes years to build out, and some things are years in the making at this point.
Speaking of that, not many president and CEOs, have a chain above them and a chain below them. You obviously running a larger nonprofit here. You have a board of directors that you have to report to.
Yes.
Then you have your staff that you have to manage.
Yes.
So how do you, what sort of challenges do you face, and how do you deal with all that in one?
Well, as you mentioned, like any other nonprofit organization, they have a board of trustees. It's a 15-person board, mostly made up of all veterans. Reflective from across the community, because I mentioned earlier the partnership with Milwaukee County. There are 2 seats on our board of trustees that the county executive is able to place. We're pretty unique. We exist in state statute, Wisconsin State Statute, Chapter 45, which touches all things veterans. We're one of only 2 veterans organizations, because we do receive some level of public funding. And under that, they set that term. So I report to the Board of Trustees. I work very closely with our chairman and the executive committee. I work closely with every board member. I want to keep them involved. And we've been with growing that. As you said, the staff. But I would almost say I'm almost right in the center of an orb.
Yeah.
So there's the community and our veteran organizations. I don't necessarily report to them, but that's our chief constituency. That's our chief consumer. We serve our veterans. We serve our military. So even though maybe it's dotted line versus straight line org chart, we take that into account too, because we want to make sure that we have business solutions that we have to make, but we also want to make sure that we're not disregarding those channels in respect to our veteran community and the citizenry that surrounds them. So.
No, absolutely. Speaking of all the things that you said here, you're very good at moving the needle forward and stuff like that. So if I'm a veteran and I'm looking to start a nonprofit, obviously do your research, make sure there's not another organization doing exactly what you're looking to do. But what are some tips that you could give somebody who's looking to stand up a foundation or a nonprofit, for veterans, or even any in general, because you got a lot of experience with it?
Well, I do, and in fact, I mentioned Fisher House earlier. We were local. It was Fisher House, Wisconsin. There's a national foundation, and I looked at the fundamentals. Again, go back to the 5-paragraph operations order, and I worked with a group. It doesn't exist anymore here in our market, but they helped me make sure I understood how to properly stand up a nonprofit, all the checks and balance. And so we worked with them. It's all fundamental stuff that you have to do. Key, getting a good accountant, getting somebody who understands nonprofit law and accounting, because those are really the 2 primary things that you've got to do, beyond the needs assessment of what's out there. And then I would say, eventually then what would happen is when they were standing up Fisher Houses around the country, they were directed to call me and say, what did we do back here? And I truly believe it was just basic fundamental football, right?
Sure.
The fundamental stuff. There was no secret sauce in what we were doing, but then getting the right team assembled, getting the right board of trustees, making sure that they're all on the same page for the vision, because if you have counter agendas, you're defeating yourself.
Absolutely.
And so that was really important with us. We did not just have board sitters on our board for that, and we became the first in the country to raise the full amount, all the amount locally. And Boston was the only one who came close. They raised all the money, and that was $5.5 million.
Wow. And
again, all volunteers. So it's about getting the right team around you. Sound familiar?
Yep.
Everybody knows their responsibilities, working diligently to keep everybody up to speed on where everything's at, but then also just reaching out to somebody who's done this. Talk to somebody who's walked that walk. And I know the Small Business Administration has a number of programs where they will find an executive who maybe is retired or a very seasoned individual, and they'll have you sit down with those folks and talk to them. Great idea.
Yeah.
And whether you use that program, I think it was called the SCORE program, and if that still exists, but I'm sure some type of model still exists like that. Just talk to somebody who's done that. It doesn't have to be the same, is it a housing authority thing, or is it a soup kitchen? I don't know, whatever you want to do within that, or but go talk to somebody who's accomplished it, and then kind of reverse engineer, like we do again in the military, and go, okay, that's where we want to be, build back from that.
Yeah.
So.
Or get involved with a nonprofit and learn all the aspects of it, and before you decide.
Volunteer.
Volunteer.
Exactly. Yes.
So last question, what's next for Dan Buttery in the next 5-10 years?
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'll always continue to serve, because if that's gone, I'm done. You know what I mean? I'm just like, it's a big part of who I am. And so, at some point I'd like to slow down a little bit. Sorry, do a little more vision.
Is that possible?
Yeah, no, it is. It is. I really, here at this organization, we want to turn the model around where you're always going to be that next level of what you're trying to achieve. Go away from insolvency around the corner, get it kicked out a little bit further, and then grow the programs. And I'd love for us in 5 years here to be going, what do we want to do? Because we have the capability to do that. And then we are able to build that, very similar to standing up a nonprofit. Excuse me. Very similar to standing up a nonprofit, where you look at the needs assessment, what's out there, and then does it meet your mission? I have a couple things I say to the staff all the time. One, I'm the protocol officer, because on staff we have some folks who have served, like myself. Others are family members, but sometimes when we would do events, it was a little bit off. And even before I started here, some vets would lean in and go, what are they doing? You know what I mean? So that's the cultural side of things. And then the other piece is, I don't want to do a lot of things. It's not all about doing something. It's about doing something really well, that has mission, that has impact, that delivers. When you come in as someone who volunteers, or you're a veteran, a Marine veteran who happens to show up at an activity, and you walk away from that going, that's amazing. Because people are busy, they have family life, they have work life if they're not retired. There's a lot of distractions out there, and the last thing people want to do is say, I just want to add something to my life that's just going to make me more busy in something that I don't care about.
Right.
No one says that. You got to check your reality if that's your thought. Or you can say, I love that. I will make that part of what I do every year or every month or whatever the cycle is on that. And so I don't want us to do a lot of things. I just want us to do things really well that have that impact. And so, and then still meets our mission.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time again, sir.
Thank you, Brian.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
If you support military veterans, military spouses, veteran-owned businesses, and veteran nonprofits, hit the subscribe button below and hit the bell to get alerts on new content coming out. We appreciate your support. If you know of any patriots doing great things in business and community that we should interview, please let us know in the comment section below. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of VetBizTV.